Jen, what's your best game of hide and go seek you've ever played?
Oh my god. I think when I was younger, I used to go to church and I used to go to this youth group and we would like play hide and seek in the dark in the church at night. And I think I was with one of our friends, Julia, and we would hide in like this bathtub that they would do for like baptismal like baptizing or whatever. I remember like it being like it was like really it was an older church, right? So it was like dark and I just remember us like hiding in there and then it was like this weird we had this church sleepover. So obviously the boys and the girls couldn't be together and we were like spying on the boys, which sounds so like creepy, but we were like bored because all the other women at the church, well, they weren't women, they were girls. They were real like 12, 13, 14. I don't know how old I was. I don't even know how old I am now.
Too old.
We were like they were doing all this like girly pop stuff and we were kind of like I'm bored, and then we were playing hide and seek and we hid in this like bathtub thing, and then it was like low key kind of creepy because like it's a church and it's dark and it's old, and yeah, I feel like that's the only story I have because like I don't know. What about you?
Well, there was this one time we were playing hide and go seek, and I hid underneath like the bathroom sink at our friend um Henrietta's place.
Oh yeah.
Like fucking crickets, dude.
Sorry, I was just like Henrietta.
I didn't know if I wanted to dox her real name or not. Yeah, so I was underneath the sink, and I remember you guys were looking around for like a really long time, a longer time than it felt like for most when you're playing hide and go seek. But what if you were playing hide and go seek and no one ever found you? And even though you screamed and you cried and you banged, you couldn't get out of your hiding spot. What if it wasn't really your hiding spot? What if you're forced to stay in this hiding spot? Imagine you're back in your childhood and your dad calls you over. He wants your help to bring a door down into the basement. Okay, that's fine. He's like an engineer guy, construction guy. You don't really know what he does, but it seems like he does important stuff and he just needs help with the door. Simple enough. So you grab it, he grabs the other end, you're shuffling down the stairs. As you're shuffling, he leads you to this kind of offshoot of the basement, and you know he was just constructing something new, and you're kind of excited to see it because it's kind of been like a hush hush project. He hasn't really told anyone about what's been happening in the basement. So you go down there, and he leads you down the secret corridor. It's like really narrow and there's not a lot going on. Like it's just drywall, kind of dark, it's dingy, it's dirty. There's a lot of dust settling on the floor. Like he just built this, so that's fine. You think nothing of it. And he says, "Yep, stop right here. Okay. All right. I want you to hold the other end of the door. Just go in that room there and hold it up for me. I'm gonna nail it in place." Okay, simple enough job. You step into the room. It's pretty narrow. The low hanging ceiling, it's about 5 foot 8 inches to the roof. Like it's pretty small. And the room itself is not that big. I wonder if he's gonna be like making some kind of like beer or doing like some distillery or just like maybe this is an office. Oh well. So you put up the door. He starts putting the nails in one after another. And you're holding out for what feels like a long time. This is a heavy door. Like it's like a heavy steel door. And you're there, you're waiting, and then that's when he opens up the door finally. And in his hand, he doesn't have a hammer and nails or like any kind of tool. Instead, he has a leash in his hand. Okay, sure. A leash and a collar. Is this like a surprise? Are you gonna get a dog? That's so exciting. And that's when he sticks the collar on you. Okay, excuse me? What do you mean? And that's when you start realizing things don't feel quite right. He's gonna leave you chained up to this bed for the next 3 days. And all around you, these walls will be your home for the next 24 years of your life. This is the story of Elizabeth, whose dad kept her in a basement for 24 years. Hi, and welcome to the Decomposing Flower podcast. We're excited to have you here as we delve into some very dark and sometimes occasionally disturbing true crime cases. I'm your host, Kira, and with me is Jen. Everything we say in our podcast is information that we have gathered from testimonies, interviews, documents, books, and other trustful sources. Anything we say is our own opinion. If we get any information wrong, feel free to let us know either in our little Google document where you can make case suggestions, or you can let us know down in the comments. We mean no disrespect to the victims or anyone affected by this case. We just want to spread more knowledge and talk about, in this case, a survival story. Today we're going to be discussing the case of Elizabeth and her father, Fritzl. Fritzl? I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I'll probably just call him Joseph because that's his first name, and he doesn't deserve any respect. Before we get started, I want to give a few trigger warnings. We're going to be talking about some pretty intense assault of a child, and there's a lot of incest and threat on children's life. There's an infanticide as well as like kidnapping. So if that's upsetting and you feel this isn't the right headspace for you right now, check out one of our other episodes. Take care of yourself, grab yourself a tea, and get a snack, and we'll see you in the next episode. So, with that being said, let's get into it. This all started, and it might not have all started this, but it kind of kicked off the whole thing. I'm sure Joseph had thoughts of this beforehand, but this is what he uses as his excuse. In 1983, Elizabeth ran away from home. She had worked with another girl from work, and that's where she went into hiding, in the city's 20th district, far, far away from her parents. But evidently, it was not far enough. This man was very persuasive, and as an engineer, he had a lot of insight and connections within the industry. So she was free for about 3 weeks, and then after that, she was returned to her parents and to the place that would later become her prison. Her father, right before she ran away from home, had assaulted her for perhaps the first time. Elizabeth has a hard time recalling how many times she's been assaulted. It's definitely been over 3,000, or yeah, 3,000 times as
Oh
she
my
can
god.
recall. But with her running away from home, she helped her father create the story that he would later use when the missing persons report was filed. Because as the police knew her, she was a runaway and a rascal and a troubled child and just a teenage misfit. She'd run away from home. Her credibility was kind of shot. She didn't really have too much of a leg to stand on. And you know the way adults kind of are when it comes to children. I know in school I would tell sometimes some pretty wild tales. Like there was this one time I told my teacher that I had I had wolves at home, and you probably remember this. We used to have uh these chickens and falcons that we would bring into class.
Oh my god.
And so just imagine you're a teacher who's watching these little kids sit at their desk petting these chickens and these falcons. And they would get mad if you said, "Hey, stop petting your chicken in the middle of class. He needs attention right now."
But they were invisible.
Well, yeah, they were invisible, but they were there,
Yeah.
They were
And like
present.
yeah, like I'm just remembering we would like pet it like as if it was there and we were just like, "No, this is chicken. This is
This is
falcon." Oh
chicken.
my god, dude.
No, don't sit there. Chicken's sitting there.
And we were like 12, by the way.
Oh, yeah, we were pretty good.
Or like 11 or whatever.
We were young. So, I mean, if I had a kid, if I was back in my age, if I had a kid come up to me and be like, "Hey, I need a place to park my tiger," I probably wouldn't believe them that they had a tiger, but yeah, who knows? Maybe I'd pretend. But the police here didn't really care too much, I should say. So after she returned back home, her father didn't really touch her during that first couple of weeks, but then it started all over again. She made the decision that she would stick it out and endure it until her program finished and she would finally be free. It was a year later, in the late summer of 1984. She just got the opportunity of a lifetime to finally move away into the city of Litz, which is in northern Austria. And she was going to move out. This was her chance. She was finally free and she was about to get away from her father. That's when he asked her to help her with just a simple favor. He needed Elizabeth to carry a door into the basement. It was August 28th, 1984, and this would be the last day that she would ever see this guy for at least another 24 years. She was holding the door into place when he and attached the door. That's when he held a cloth onto her face until she was unconscious. She didn't know what it was soaked in. But either way, she passed out and she woke up into the chamber. This was a man who was used to tinkering and DUI, and he had a nefarious purpose. He wanted someone who would be at his mercy at all times, who would have to submit to his moods and desires. And he was very carefully planning this whole assault. It was intended for a long-term purpose. All he had to do was properly design the environment and minimize any chances for error. He had all the necessary arrangements already down there for when Elizabeth got there: food, water, and then that was like the first run. Eventually, there would be things like clothes, and then things like diapers would start going down there. One of Joseph's coworkers said that their department was developing a machine to pour concrete pipes, like making sewage systems essentially. And it was pretty detailed and complex. Joseph was the director of the project. So he was a man who was used to spending months developing a project. His coworker remembered talking to the director, and all he knew about his life was that he was married. Everything else he was so private about. And he just figured, he's just a private guy. But Joseph never took personal phone calls. There was no pictures of his family. He didn't even know he had children. Later on, he's quite convinced that once this all came out, he was a man who was very capable of holding a secret for years. He wasn't one to be boastful about it. He just wanted to revel in his own kind of aura, I would say. Concrete was Joseph's specialty, and he could have built anything with his own hands. So, like I mentioned, Elizabeth was still a girl the first time he assaulted her. Around only the age of 11 or 12, she wasn't able to tell anyone. She didn't have anyone who she felt like could have defended her, including her older siblings. This is because he ruled the house with an iron thumb. Whenever he came home from work, her friends would have to leave the house immediately, and anyone who was in the house had to remain silent when he walked into a room. It would be kind of like an eerie hush hush. It was just an unspoken rule. You didn't talk when he was around. If he saw joy or smiling or felt anything was wrong, you would get beat. If they failed to comply or forgot to say please or thank you, he would beat them. And when Elizabeth ran away, that appeared to be the breaking point for Joseph. She was so afraid. When he came to her, she knew in his eyes that she was nothing to him except his own flesh and his blood, and he could take whatever he wanted because he made her, essentially. Let's get into maybe a little bit of Joseph's backstory and perhaps a couple of maybe his previous crimes, allegedly, even though it's highly suspected that he did all these things. So in 1972, Joseph and his wife purchased an inn, which was just on Mondsee Lake in Upper Austria, and he decided to enter the hospitality business, which was highly suspected just to be insurance fraud, as there was two fires that occurred at the inn. But it was never proven that it was explicitly like an insurance fraud. But I mean, he sold a bunch of real estate and ran a mail order lingerie business. So
Oh.
yeah, he kind of was doing weird stuff already. And later on, after he had assaulted Elizabeth for the first time, he submitted an extension for the basement kind of permit in their home. It took him 5 years to reportedly complete the work, and when building inspectors came to the site, they confirmed, yep, okay, he did build this and things were looking good. This is all up to code. But they believe that he was able to conceal the rooms that he had built for the dungeon. it was called. And eventually, later on, these dungeon walls would expand. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Even though he had Elizabeth imprisoned in his basement, he had his wife, Rosemary, and his other children living upstairs. He also had tenants who lived in his house. People who
While
read.
she was there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So he already had, and I believe, six other children living upstairs. And it might be just four that he had with Rosemary. Sources say it's either six or four. I don't really know. But eventually there would be more children, and we'll get into that. So Joseph was born in Emsden, which is a town today with 23,000 inhabitants. He was born in 1935. His parents were named Maria and also Joseph. He was raised a Roman Catholic and attended school. He was a very kind of like traditional boy. His father went to the army and actually ended up passing away in service. So he grew up without his dad, and his mother raised him with her fist. She was a very strict woman. People remember seeing him black and blue almost every single day. And Joseph describes his mother as the best woman in the world. You know, she was strict as necessary, but apparently he was like a little shit, he described himself. Later on, as the trial kind of went on, he expressed a negative opinion of his mother, saying, "Oh, she used to beat me, hit me until I was lying in a pool of my own blood. It left me feeling humiliated and weak. My mother worked really hard her whole life. I never got a kiss from her. I never was cuddled, even though I wanted it. I wanted to be good for her, and I wanted her to be good to me." He claimed that his mother called him Satan, a criminal, a no good, and he had a horrible fear of her. So he definitely extended that on to his own family. Love that for him. So after he married and bought a house, his mother eventually moved in with them. Over time, their roles became reversed. His mother came to fear him. And this is the
Oh.
interesting part. Eventually, as the trial went on, Joseph admitted he had later locked his mother in an attic, bricked up her window after telling the neighbors she had died, and kept her locked away until her death in 1980.
Oh my
He had
god.
purchased his house in the 1960s, so it's unknown how long he directly held his mother captive, but a lot of sources say that it may have been up to 20 years that he had kept his mother captive. That's just important to know that he'd already done this before. So he was a seasoned expert in holding someone captive. And no one really batted an eye because apparently the mother was dead, supposedly. She was very sick.
Wow.
Yeah.
A
Elizabeth.
bit of a red flag.
It's a bit of a red flag, if I'm being honest. Yeah. So a bit on the mother, Rosemary. At 21, Joseph married Rosemary. She was 17, and I mean, I'm not saying this uh, about her, but a lot of sources say that she was poorly educated and she was trained to just work around the house, and Joseph was kind of all she had, and eventually her children were really all she had. Joseph was highly intelligent, and some say that this really prevented him from taking his wife seriously. He was totally in control in their own marriage. He was in control of the finances. So Rosemary really felt like, they just kind of, he's doing his thing. I'll just hang out here. Things are okay. She did have to put up with his solo vacation to Thailand, in which she knew that he would go to Pattaya, which is kind of like their red light district paradise place.
Oh.
So it's pretty
Yeah.
obvious what he was doing there. But I mean, she just kind of was like, okay, you do you.
Was he
And
physically abusive to her?
a lot of sources don't really say a whole lot. I mean,
Mm.
based on what he does to like their children and to other women,
Yeah.
I wouldn't go as far to say no, but I don't have any confirming sources.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, she was aware that he would do like a lot of work in the basement. Like it would be kind of like a routine, like 9 o'clock on the dot. He's out of bed. He's woke and he's going down into the basement. And she just kind of like was like, okay, I wonder what you're doing down there. And he would be like, don't worry about it. I don't want to be disturbed. Don't bring me coffee. Don't bring me laundry. Don't talk to me. I'm just gonna go work on my machine design drawings down there. I'm gonna go work on my plans.
Damn.
I mean, he was scheming, but
Very suspicious.
yeah, a little sussy if I do say so myself.
Yeah.
So Rosemary definitely had given him 4 children, but this is where we get into the other women. So allegedly, Joseph had assaulted a woman in the northern city of Linz. In 1967, he had broken into a home of a 24-year-old woman's house. She was a nurse, and while her husband was away, he held a knife to her throat so hard it drew blood. She was in deep trouble. The whole time, he threatened to kill her if she screamed. If she made too much noise, that was it. He was going to slit her throat. And he assaulted her. And in the same year, he was also named a suspect in an attempted assault of a 21-year-old woman. And he was known for indecent exposure. Joseph was arrested and served 12 months of an 18-month prison sentence. But according to Austrian law, his criminal record was expunged after 15 years. So at the time of the crimes, he didn't have a criminal record. And it took 25 years for local authorities to eventually discover his criminal history after he had adopted slash fostered some children who inexplicably ended up on his doorstep. But we will get into that. And you're probably thinking, yo, he had tenants, he had neighbors. Why didn't they hear anything? Why didn't they say anything? So, a neighbor who lived across the street said that they repeatedly heard hammering and construction noises coming from the property. And, like, she would be gardening and being like, oh, I wonder what's going on today. What are you building? Oh, I wonder if he's extending the house. And she would ask, like, what are you building? You just say, yeah, I'm just doing some renos, some house repairs. Then out of the 100 roughly tenants that they had in the rented rooms over the house for many years, Alfred had said that there were some pretty strict rules regarding the privacy around the premises. So Alfred said that their leases would have been terminated without notice if they ever entered the garden or the basement. He remembers the bags that Joseph was always carrying down into the basement.
Wouldn't you find that like so suspicious?
Yeah, like he's always leaving with bags, coming out with bags. What are you doing with all those bags? If you're
And then
working
being
on,
like, you can't go down there. Like I
yeah,
would be like, what are you hiding?
yeah. I mean, hindsight's 2020, really, but I mean, it
Yeah,
seems like he's doing stuff.
yeah.
Anyways, life in the basement was rough. Within the first couple days of Elizabeth's containment, she was handcuffed to a column or a bed, some sources say. Either way, she was leashed and handcuffed where Joseph had left her for 2 days. He made sure that she could at least go to the bathroom. And even though Joseph denies it, Elizabeth says that he had kept the leash on for the next 6 months, perhaps even 9. All the while, he repeatedly came down to the basement and assaulted her. He was in complete control, and she had no recollection of how many times during this period she was assaulted. And you're probably thinking, why didn't the mom do anything? Her daughter's literally missing. Like, how do you wake up one day, see her take a door down to the basement, and the next day she's gone? Don't
Yeah.
you think that's suspicious? So, a day after she disappeared, Rosemary, the mom, reported her daughter as missing. And a short time later, Joseph conveniently handed a letter over to the police. This was the first that Elizabeth was forced to write in captivity. It was marked, postmarked from a postal office in the near town of oh God, sorry guys, anyways, a nearby town. According to the letter, she was tired of living at home and she's just going to stay with a friend. She had joined a cult and she warned her parents not to look for her, otherwise, she would leave the country and never talk to them again. So
Wow.
convenient. The authorities had an excuse for dropping the case. Clearly, the daughter's fine. She just ran off to join a religion and she was living her new life, whatever. She'd already been in trouble before. She had already run off. It was only a matter of weeks before the investigators gave up on her. All the while, down in the basement, Joseph told Elizabeth that he would gas her, and this gas would kill her if she tried to attack or escape. Whenever he left the basement, he would fiddle with a gadget or like a couple of pipes near the door as if he was setting a system. It appears that this was nothing but an attempt to intimidate her. It was all pretend. There was no gas system, but he would still beat her if she did anything. So she lived in a single room in the basement until 1993. Joseph roughly visited her every 3 days to bring her food and to assault her. At first, it was just the two of them, but eventually, she would give birth to their first child, Kirsten, in 1988. Then there's Stefan in 1990 and Lisa in 1992. And maybe like the sickest part is he would make her watch videos. Like they would watch porn. He would make her watch porn. And I don't know what kind of porn or if it was like child pornography or whatever, but he would make her watch that and then she would be forced to replicate that with him.
Oh.
And he would do that in the presence of their children.
Oh my
And
god.
then whew, with her bare hands and with her children's bare hands, they had to work on digging out soil. For years, she felt like they would dig, and this would become their second room because there were
Oh,
so many of them that lived down in the basement.
oh my god.
Yeah. Joseph said he wasn't a monster. He made sure they had television and a radio and a video cassette player. Food could be stored in the refrigerator or cooked on hot plates. Elizabeth tried her best to give her children exactly all she knew. She was only 12 when she went down into the basement. So
Oh,
she taught her kids how to read and how to write. All the while, Joseph would punish the family by shutting off their lights or refusing to deliver food for days at a time. All of the
wow.
children knew that if they tried to escape their room, they would be gassed, and their mother and everyone would die. He also said that they would be electrocuted if they messed with the cellar door. And eventually, he would take Lisa upstairs and he took her in a cardboard box. There is a letter that was included with this baby, and it's still in her adoption file today. It was truly probably the sickest thing. He forced Elizabeth to write a letter and give up her child. She wrote in the letter, "You will probably be shocked to hear from me after all these years, and with real live surprise, no less. I breastfed her, Lisa, her child, for about 6.5 months, and she now drinks from a bottle. She is a good girl, and she eats everything else from the spoon." The letter was filled with a sense of normalcy, and it seemed only natural that she would write to her parents and ask them to take in her kid, and to politely ask her parents not to find her and respect her alternative living style. Joseph took the baby and this letter to the authorities so that he could legally adopt Lisa, to take her upstairs where his wife, Rosemary, would continue to take care of her. He even brought Lisa's old school notebooks and said that they could look at this letter and the notebooks and indeed agree that this was Lisa who had wrote this. And as their grandparents, it was completely okay for them to adopt their flesh and blood, which is so sad. So within the year that they had adopted Lisa, the next child, 9-month-old Monica, followed. It was shortly after midnight, but this baby was not left in a cardboard box, but was found in a stroller inside the vestibule of their house. The phone rang a few minutes later when Rose Mary answered the phone, and it was Elizabeth on the other line asking her to take care of her child. "I just left her at her door," she heard on the phone. Rosemary was in total shock. She hadn't heard her daughter's voice in years, and now she'd left another baby. How many babies does she have? And this was so surprising because they have an unlisted number. There was no way Elizabeth would have known what their number was. They changed it, and you couldn't find it anywhere. It was completely inexplainable, she felt like. But luckily, Joseph just so happened to have an explanation that quickly whisked the situation away. I don't know what the actual explanation he gave, but yeah. Apparently, he'd use a recording of Elizabeth's voice to make the call. But still,
Wow.
they were down in the dungeon behind the steel reinforced concrete door that weighed about 661 pounds, as well as an additional steel door. Life went on as usual. Lights on, lights out. Lights on, lights out. Lights on, assault. Lights out. Things continued like this for years. Alexander was born in 1996, and just like Monica, he was taken upstairs and adopted. His twin brother, Michael, died shortly after the birth, and Elizabeth says that Joseph took the baby and incinerated it in a furnace. The last child, Felix, was born in 2002. The boy remained in the dungeon with Elizabeth and her two oldest children, Kirsten and Stefan. The reason why he didn't bring little Felix upstairs was because Rosemary couldn't have handled another child. He said this during his interrogation. The only connection the family had with the world outside was through the television set. It was their whole reality. But for the children in the basement, it was like watching a film. Images of meadows, mosquitoes, sun, sky, that all felt like fantasy. They'd never felt the touch of grass. They'd never smelt a flower, never felt the itch of a mosquito bite. Cars, spaceships, phones, lightsabers, this was all imaginary. They never knew that rain existed, that the moon happened, that there were oceans. They knew what these things were, but they'd never seen or experienced them. Joseph didn't kill his children, he destroyed them. By keeping his children in a vault, he would see them for maybe an hour or two. He would bring them food or medication, but he would reassure himself that this is all fine. This is normal. These are mine and they shouldn't go anywhere. But above, in the normal world, the children that he took upstairs lived normal childhood lives. They were very encouraged. They went to gymnastics and they had books and cassettes and they were very smart. Social workers understood that they were very loving with their children. He was undoubtedly strict, but perhaps not as destructive as his first round of children. It was
Wow.
primarily Rosemary who cared for the kids. Almost every single day, she would drive them to music lessons. The children's music teachers say that they were awed at how strong Rosemary was. Every day, she would take care of her children, and she would do it with a smile on her face. There was only one time where they asked about Elizabeth, and she talked about how she'd run away from home and joined religion and how much she missed her daughter and how she wondered she was doing. According to Elizabeth, her mom knew nothing about her captivity. It was only Joseph who she saw, who brought food and clothing. And you're probably wondering at this point, oh my God, when does this fucking end? This is awful. Don't worry, guys, it ends, but it ends in perhaps the saddest way. It had been 24 years. Elizabeth was now a 42-year-old woman who had spent more than half of her life, really, in the underground bunker. It was Kirsten, who is 19 years old now. She had always been very sickly, but all of a sudden, her health deteriorated rapidly. She was having cramps and biting her lips until they bled. She was deathly ill, and Elizabeth knew that she was going to die. She begged Joseph again and again, we need to take her to the hospital. She's not going to make it. And even though he would bring like Advil and like little bits of medication, there was no way she was going to live to see another day. For whatever reason, Joseph made the decision that, yep, okay, this time we should take her to the hospital. But he was unable to carry this 19-year-old woman out of the basement. So Elizabeth helped drag her child out from their prison. It was the first time that she had ever seen the light of day for a long time. And for Kristen, this was her first time ever breathing in fresh air. It would only be a couple of minutes before Elizabeth was forced to return to the dungeon. Joseph called an ambulance and he had to make another story, a quick story, because there was no time. And we'll get into what the okay, so the story that he came up with, why this mysterious woman was there, was apparently she had just passed out in the stairs, and he found this young woman leaning against the wall, barely holding on. But in her hand, she held a note, and he forced Elizabeth to later write this note. That this was Elizabeth's daughter, Kirsten, and she urgently needed his help. So in the hospital, they noted, goddamn, it looks like this woman has never seen sun and she is in rough shape. They were unsure what was wrong with her. They speculated it could be epilepsy, but they didn't really know. And they needed more information from her mother. That's when the police decided to find Elizabeth, who was officially still classified as missing. They reopened her missing person case. Joseph then repeated his old story about his daughter who ran off and was this big misfit. And then he presented a new letter, supposedly from Elizabeth, dated in 2008, that she wrote that her son Felix had been very ill and he often had epileptic seizures and symptoms of what is it called when you're frozen?
Paralysis?
Yes, thank you, paralysis. But luckily, he had recovered enough, and that they should take him in because she wasn't in the right spot to continue to take care of her son Felix. So he presented this to the doctors and the police, and he also found another letter that described that Kirsten also had health problems, including stabbing chest pains and circulatory system symptoms. Conveniently, there's just all these letters overflowing in. But in this new letter that had described Kirsten's symptoms, it also continued that Stefan and Elizabeth would soon be able to come home and celebrate the birthdays with Lisa. This was perhaps the last time that the police bought these letters. This was mostly due in part that these letters had been postmarked from another town about 70 kilometers away from where they actually lived. So the investigators focused on the wrong town. And so they were like, yep, seems good. She's running around still. I don't know. And naturally, none of the doctors questioned about why they couldn't find this mysterious woman named Kirsten anywhere. They were just like, yeah, seems good. But that was when the officer in charge, Manfred Wolfhart, took a look at these letters and took a look at the original letter and noted that everything seemed oddly smooth and constructed and not very authentic sentences, especially for an 11-year-old. His conclusion that there was no evidence of a sect or a cult that Elizabeth had joined. This assessment was 24 years too late. 7 children's lives who were ruined too late. And in her dungeon, Elizabeth was also watching the story unfold. She heard that the doctors were searching for her, and it was a matter of life or death for Kirsten. On the Saturday, Joseph concluded that there was only one way for them to save Kirsten and save his cover, more importantly. So he allowed Elizabeth to come to the surface, and the other children were allowed out as well. He brought Elizabeth, Stefan, and Felix from the dungeon, and they were finally allowed to see the light of day. The police received a
Wow.
call from the hospital later on that evening that there were some suspicious individuals who randomly visited Kirsten. The police rushed over and just in time to catch Joseph and Elizabeth. They were both taken to police headquarters and questioned separately. Originally, Elizabeth did not want to say anything. It took probably about maybe an hour for her to be assured that she would never have to see her father again and that her children and her mother would be protected. It only took 2 hours for Elizabeth to tell her whole 24 years of captivity. Elizabeth, who had been raped thousands of times, had to endure 8,516 days of her life stuck underneath the ground of her own house, with her light dictating when dawn and dusk would be, with a simple light switch switching on and off. Each day was indistinguishable from the next day. The passing of time was only recognizable by the nature of her life, as her children turned older and older, and her own hair turning gray, until on the day of her liberation when it was completely white. In the following interviews with Joseph, he said that his behavior towards his daughter wasn't rape, it was consensual. He always knew that in the whole 24 years of what he was doing, it wasn't right. He must have been crazy to do such a thing. But it was such a normal occurrence to have that second life in the basement of his house. He said he's not the beast that the media makes him out to be regarding the treatment of Elizabeth and his children. He said that he brought flowers for Elizabeth and books and toys for the children into the bunker. He called it, not the prison. He would often watch videos with the children, ate meals with them and Elizabeth. The reason why he said he imprisoned Elizabeth was because she didn't adhere to the rules anymore when she became a teenager. There was only one thing I could do for my daughter, and that was create a safe place where I could keep Elizabeth by force, if necessary, to keep her away from the outside world, which was trying to rip her away. He was
Wow.
charged with the murder of his own baby that he fathered with his daughter Elizabeth, who he kept locked in a dungeon for 24 years. He is alleged to have allowed the child to die without medical attention, and then he disposed of the body in the furnace rather than reveal his daughter's situation. She told prosecutors that he had died from breathing difficulties. Doctors were able to identify the birth complication that the baby had suffered from and stated that he would have actually lived if they went to a hospital. On the first day that Joseph had entered the courtroom, he attempted to hide his face from all the cameras behind his little blue folder. So, after all the opening statements and journalists and spectators were asked to leave the courtroom, he finally lowered his little blue folder. His defending lawyer appealed the jury not to be swayed by their emotions, and he insisted that Joseph was not a monster, explaining that he allowed a Christmas tree to be brought down to his captives during the holidays.
Wow.
What
That
a truly remarkable man.
yeah, like Saint Nick, who? Like
Yeah, wow. What's who's Chris Kringle? Who is this man? What's Snow? The lawyer who was defending, who was trying to prosecute him, had demonstrated for the jurors the low height of the ceiling, which was 5 foot 8 inches, and described the cellar as damp and moldy, and passed around a box of the objects taken from the cellar, which made the jurors flinch smelling it. During the
wow.
first day of testimony, they had to watch 11 hours, which was recorded by Elizabeth in the presence of police and psychologists. The tape is said to be so harrowing that 8 jurors could not watch more than 2 hours at a time. 4 replacement jurors had to stand on by if any of the jurors could not bear to continue. And Elizabeth's older brother also testified that he was physically abused as a child, but the rest of Elizabeth's children and Rosemary did not testify against Joseph. Originally, Joseph was going in claiming to be innocent against the charge of infanticide, as well as another charge. I don't recall what it was. But he was able to see Elizabeth was in court. And at this point, he is said to go very pale and broke down. The very next day, he began the proceedings by saying, "Yeah, I'm guilty. I did it all." And woof, this is the part that gets my blood boiling. Okay. So he was sentenced in 2009 to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 15 years.
15.
Hmm.
Not even the same amount she was
In captivity for it.
that.
Yeah,
That's such a slap in the face.
such a slap in the face. But just wait, it gets worse. So he's currently serving out his sentence in Guernston Abbey, which is a former nunnery that has been converted into a comfortable modern prison. And this was chosen by him as the place to serve his life sentence because he had a couple psychological disorders, including like his narcissism and a couple other issues. But because he was diagnosed with two mental disorders, he was allowed to choose where he gets to serve his sentence.
That's such a joke.
In Garnston, he is able to improve his English or study other foreign languages, as well as he's able to sing in the choir or train in a gym, which is better equipped than many in the hotels. As an inmate, he's also offered a wide variety of hobbies and entertainment, including tennis, darts, and art classes. In
Wow.
this prison, which is set in the woodland foothills of the Alps, which is considered probably one of the most beautiful places in the world. He is provided with light and fresh air from the mountains, which is something that his victims were deprived of in his dark prison. Like I said, he could be released on parole after just 15 years, where he has been served or he's been forced to indulge his passion for reading, as it has one of the largest libraries in the country.
Where is like Elizabeth living in like witness protection plan?
Yeah, so they were given new identities and moved to a secret location, but tabloid reporters tracked them down to take photographs.
That's so disrespectful. I hate that.
hmm And they kind of doxed her. So now they're back in a psychiatric clinic where when they were first released and caught. So they're back there. And their therapy and living costs are being funded by the state.
Mm.
Elizabeth and her two adult children, too traumatized to be able to work or perhaps re-enter society. If
That's so sad.
Joseph becomes too frail or senile to serve out his remaining sentence, he will be transferred to a prison retirement home where he will be cared by nurses for the rest of his life.
He should just be put in like a bunker and rot.
And rot, yeah.
Like
Um,
like it's so not fair that she and her children had to endure that and then he gets to live comfortably even if he's in prison.
yeah.
Like
Even though he's behind bars, like truly how those bars are nothing if he's living in comfort. That's comfort
yeah,
that was deprived from these children and Elizabeth, who was a child herself.
and like her kids are unfortunately are going to be traumatized for the rest of their lives and are never going to have a normal life.
hmm
That makes me that makes me so mad.
Yeah. And a lot of people also remember the case of Natasha. We're just going to call her Natasha, where she was also held captive in a bunker for 8 years. She was caged and contained by the deranged loner Wolfgang for 8.5 years. He had two really parts of his personality. One was the bright side, and one was the dark side. He was kind of like this inconspicuous, polite person on one side, and on the other side, he was a brutal psychopath. The only way she was able to escape was by pretending to fall in love with him. And because of that, he allowed Natasha out into the garden, but he all the time kept her as a domestic slave and abused
Oh,
her and withheld food as punishment. Sometimes he would only give her a carrot for 2 days or longer,
wow.
which is crazy because the whole time she lived just under his house. And it was kind of like in this part where it was like there was a fridge in front of it, and then there was like a long trail, and then there was a hole in the ground. They get creative with their construction here. I'll put up like a little picture here, but yeah. So sometimes there's just a little bit of crazy people out there in the world. With that being said, I just wanted to close it off by perhaps talking about one part of justice which maybe didn't happen. And we talked about the assaults and the rapes and everything, but we didn't talk about the murder. And this is still alleged. Keep in mind, there was another woman, couple women actually, where Joseph was looked into the suspect of their deaths. One, her name was Anna Newmeyer. Her age was 17. She was killed with a bolt pistol in the field of Linz in 1966. She had disappeared on her way to a town where Joseph had worked at the time, but they never really closed the case, and I believe they never caught the murderer, which was maybe Joseph. Another victim, her name was Gabriela Suprokova. She was 42. She was murdered in 2007, and her body was found at the reservoir where he was on holiday at the time. He was not charged with these murders due to a lack of evidence, but perhaps the most chilling of them all is the murder of Martiana uh, Poshoff. Gosh, I'm sorry. I can't pronounce these names very well. I'm trying. But she left her home to reach a nearby bus stop. But when she didn't show up to a meeting with her boyfriend around 5, he called her mother, who had assumed that she had already been with the boyfriend. Later, the mother also learned that she had not shown up for work that day. Authorities determined through witness statements that she had not been on the bus. It was in November of 1986, which was a whole couple weeks that after she went missing, that two scuba divers had found her body wrapped in two olive green tarps on the southern shore of the Lake Mondesi. It had been determined that she had been killed by strangulation 2 hours after leaving her parents' house. After Joseph's arrest, it was a possibility that he might have been involved in the murder, since him and Rosemary owned a campsite on the opposite location where she was found. It's important to note that the victim was also very similar to Elizabeth, but there's no justice for those women, and ultimately, there's no justice for Elizabeth. And that's where we leave today's case. Let us know your thoughts. Yeah, this one was it was a long one. It was a hard one, and sadly, there's really not a lot of justice, I would say. But thank you so much for listening. We hope we explained this case with as much factual information as we could, and we just wanted to express our sympathies for the family. If you have any other case that you want us to check us out, let us know. We have a little Google Doc sheet that you can fill out with your case suggestions. And again, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And we'll see you in the next episode.